Alright, welcome back to Paper Cuts. Last we left off, we were coming up on book 8 of Paradise Lost, and we're just gonna get right into it. No more talk of where God or angel guest with man, as with his friend, familiar used to sit indulgent, and with him partake rural repast, permitting him the while venial discourse unblamed. I now must change those notes to tragic, foul distrust, and breach disloyal on the part of man, revolt and disobedience. On the part of heaven, now alienated, distance and distaste, anger and just rebuke, and judgment given, that brought into this world a world of woe, sin and her shadow death, and misery, death's harbinger, sad task, yet argument, not less but more heroic than the wrath of stern Achilles on his foe pursued, thrice fugitive about Troy wall, or rage of Turnus for Lavinia disposed, or Neptune's ire, or Juno's that so long perplexed the Greek and Cytherea's son, if answerable style I can obtain of my celestial patroness, who deigns her nightly visitation unimplored, and dictates to me slumbering, or inspires easy my unpremeditated verse, since first this subject for heroic song pleased me long choosing, and beginning late, not sedulous by nature to indite wars, hitherto the only argument heroic deemed, chief mastery to dissect with long and tedious havoc fabled knights, in battles feigned, the better fortitude of patience and heroic martyrdom unsung, or to describe races and games, or tilting furniture, emblazoned shields, impresses quaint, caparisons and steeds, bases and tinselled trappings, gorgeous knights at joust and tournament, then marshalled feast served up in hall with sewers and seneschals. The skill of artificer office mean, not that which justly gives heroic name to person or to poem. Me of these nor skilled nor studious, higher argument remains, sufficient of itself to raise that name, unless an age too late, or cold climate, or years damp my intended wing depressed, and much they may, if all be mine, not hers who brings it nightly to my ear. The sun was sunk, and after him the star of Hesperus, whose office it is to bring twilight upon the earth, short arbiter twixt day and night, and now from end to end night's hemisphere had veiled the horizon round, when Satan, who late fled from the threats of Gabriel out of Eden, now improved in meditated fraud and malice, bent on man's destruction, meagre what might happen of heavier on himself, fearless returned. By night he fled, and at midnight returned, from compassing the earth, cautious of day, since Uriel, regent of the sun, descried his entrance, and forewarned the cherubim that kept their watch. Thence, full of anguish driven, the space of 7 continued nights he rode with darkness, thrice the equicintial line he circled, 4 times crossed the car of night from pole to pole, traversing each colour. On the 8th he returned, and on the coast averse, from entrance or cherubic watch, by stealth found unsuspected way. There was a place, now, not through sin, not time, first wrought the chain, when Tigris at the foot of paradise, in a gulf shot underground, till part rose up by a fountain by the tree of life. In with the river sunk, and with it rose Satan involved in rising mist, and then sought to where to lie hid. Sea he had searched, and land, from Eden over Pontus and the pool of Maeotis, up beyond the river Ob, downward as far Antarctic, and in length west from Orontes to the ocean barred at Darien, thence to the land where flows Ganges and Indus. Thus the orb he roamed with narrow search, and with inspection deep, considered every creature, which of all most opportune might serve his wiles, and found the serpent, subtlest beast of all the field. Him, after long debate, irresolute of thoughts resolved, his final sentence chose, fit vessel, fittest imp of fraud in whom to enter, and his dark suggestions hide from sharpest sight. For in the wily snake whatever slights none would suspicious mark, as from his wit and native subtlety proceeding, in which other beasts, observed, doubt might beget of diabolic power, active within beyond the sense of brute. Thus he resolved, but first from inward grief his bursting passion into plaints thus poured.
O earth, how like to heaven, if not preferred more justly, seat worthier of gods, as built with second thoughts, reforming what was old, for what god after better worse would build? Terrestrial heaven, danced round by other heavens that shine, yet bear their bright officious lamps, light above light, for thee alone, as it seems, in thee concentrating all their precious beams of sacred influence. As God in heaven is centre, yet extends to all, so thou, centering, recavest from all the orbs. In thee, not in themselves, all their known virtue appears productive, in herb, plant, and nobler birth, of creatures animate with gradual life, of growth, sense, reason, all summed up in man. With what delight I could have walked thee round, if I could joy in aught sweet interchange of hill and valley, rivers, woods, and plains, now land and sea, and shores with forest crowned, rocks, dens, and caves. But I in none of these find place or refuge, and the more I see pleasures about me, so much more I torment within me. As from the hateful siege of contraries, all good to me becomes bane, and in heaven much worse would be my state. But neither here seek I, no, nor in heaven to dwell, unless by mastering heaven's supreme, nor hope to be myself less miserable by what I seek, but others to make such, as though I thereby worse to me redound. For only in destroying I find ease to my relentless thoughts, and him destroyed, or won to what may work his utter loss. For whom all this was made, all will soon follow, as to him linked in weal or woe. In woe then that destruction wide may range, to me shall the glory sole among be the infernal powers, in one day to have marred what the Almighty styled 6 nights and days continued making, and who knows how long before had been contriving, though perhaps not longer then, since I in one night freed from servitude inglorious well nigh half the angelic name, and thinner left the throng of his adorers. He to be avenged, and to repair his numbers thus impaired, whether such virtue spent of old now failed, more angels to create, if they at least are his created, or to spite us more, determined to advance into our room, a creature formed of earth, and him endow, exalted from so base original, with heavenly spoils our spoils. What he decreed he effected, man he made, and for him built magnificent this world, and earth his seat, him Lord pronounced, and oh indignity, subjected to his service angel wings and flaming ministers, to watch and tend their earthly charge. Of these the vengeance I dread, and to elude, thus wrapped in mist, of midnight vapour glide obscure, and pry in every bush and brake, where hap may find the serpent sleeping, in whose mazy folds to hide me, and the dark intent I bring. O foul descent, that I, who erst contended with gods to sit the highest, am now constrained into a beast, and mixed with bestial slime, this essence to incarnate and imbrute, that to the height of deity aspired. But what will not ambition and revenge descend to? Who aspires must down as low as high he soared, obnoxious first or last to basest things. Revenge at first, though sweet, bitter ere long back on itself recoils. Let it, I reckon not, so it light well aimed, since higher I fall short on him who next provokes my envy, this new favourite of heaven, this man of clay, son of despite, whom us the more despite his maker, raised from dust, spite then with spite is best repaid. So saying, through each thicket dank or dry, like a black mist low creeping, he held on his midnight search, where soonest he might find the serpent. Him fast sleeping soon he found, in a labyrinth of many a round self rolled, his head the midst well stored with subtle wiles, not yet in horrid shade or dismal den, not nocent yet, but on the grassy herb, fearless unfeared he slept. And in his mouth the devil entered, and his brutal sense its in harder head possessing soon inspired with act intelligential, but with his sleep disturbed not, waiting close the approach of morn.
Now when a sacred light began to dawn in Eden on the humid flowers that breathed their morning incense, when all things that breathe from the earth's great altar send up their silent praise to the Creator, and his nostrils fill with grateful smell, forth came the human pair, and joined their vocal worship to the choir of creatures wanting voice that done partake the season, prime for sweetest scents and airs. Then commune how that day they best may ply their growing work. For much their work outgrew the hands dispatched of two gardening so wide. And Eve first to her husband thus began. Apologies if I get a bit yawny. Adam, well may we labor still to dress this garden, still to tend plant, herb, and flower. Our pleasant task enjoyed, but till more hands aid us, the work under our labor grows, luxurious by restraint. What we day by day lop overgrown, or prune, or prop, or bind, one night or two with wanton growth derides tending to wild. Thou therefore now advise, or hear what to my mind first thoughts present. Let us divide our labors, thou where choice leads thee, or where most needs, whether to bind the woodbine round this arbor, or direct the clasping ivy where to climb, while I, in yonder spring of roses intermixed with myrtle, find what to redress till noon. For while so near each other thus all day our task we choose, what wonder if no near looks intervene and smiles, or object new casual discourse to draw on, which intermits our day's work brought to little, though begun early, and the hour of supper comes unearned. To whom mild answer Adam thus returned, Soul, Eve, associate soul, to me beyond compare, above all living creatures dear, well hast thou motioned, well thy thoughts employed, how we might best fulfill the work which here God hath assigned us, nor of me shall pass unpraised, for nothing lovelier can be found in woman than to study household good and good works in her husband to promote. Yet not so strictly hath our Lord imposed labor as to debar us when we need refreshment, whether food or talk between, food of the mind, or this sweet intercourse of looks and smiles, for smiles from reason flow, to brute deigned and are of love the food, love not the lowest end of human life. For not to irksome toil, but to delight he made us, and delight to reason joined. These paths and bowers doubt not but our joint will keep from wilderness with ease, as wide as we need walk, till younger hands ere long assist us. But if much converse perhaps thee satiate, to short absence I could yield. For solitude sometimes is best society, and short retirement urges sweet return. But other doubt possesses me, least harm befall thee severed from me, for thou know'st what hath been warned us, what malicious foe, envying our happiness, and of his own despairing, seeks to work us woe and shame by a sly assault, and somewhere nigh at hand watches, no doubt, with greedy hope to find his wish and best advantage to us asunder, hopeless to circumvent what joined, where each to each other speedy aid might lend at need, whether his first design be to withdraw our fealty from God, or to disturb our conjugal love, than which perhaps no bliss enjoyed by us excites his envy more. Or this, or worse, leave not the faithful side that gave thee being, still shades thee and protects. The wife, where danger or dishonor lurks, safest and seemliest by her husband stays, who guards her, or with her the worst endures. To whom the virgin majesty of Eve, as one who loves and some unkindness meets, with sweet austere composure thus replied, Offspring of heaven and earth, and all earth's lord, that such an enemy we have, who seeks our ruin, both by thee informed I learned, and from the parting angel overheard, as in a shady nook I stood behind, just then returned at shut of evening flowers. But that thou shouldst my fitness therefore doubt, to God or thee, because we have a foe, may tempt it, I expected not to hear. His violence thou fear'st not, being such as we, not capable of death or pain, can neither not receive or can repel. His fraud is then thy fear, which plain infers thy equal fear that my firm faith and love can be by his fraud shaken or seduced. Thoughts which now bound thy harbour in thy breast, Adam, misthought of her, to thee so dear? To whom with healing words Adam replied, Daughter of God and man and immortal Eve, for such thou art, from sin and blame entire. Not diffident of thee do I dissuade thy absence from my sight, but to avoid the attempt itself intended by our foe. For he who tempts, though in vain, at least asperses the tempted with dishonour foul, supposed not incorruptible of fate, not off against temptation. Thou thyself with scorn and anger would resent the offered wrong, and though ineffectual found, misdeem not then if such affront I labour to avert from thee alone, which on us both at once the enemy, though bold, will hardly dare, or daring first on me the assault shall light. Nor thou his malice and false guile contemn, subtle he needs must be, who could seduce angels, not think superfluous others' aid. I from the influence of thy looks receive access in every virtue, and thy sight more wise, more watchful, stronger if need were of outward strength. While shame, thou looking on, shame to be overcome or overreached, would be utmost vigour raise, and raised unite. Why shouldst not thou like sense within thee feel when I am present, and thy trial choose with me best witness of thy virtue tried? So spake domestic Adam in his care and matrimonial love, but Eve, who thought less attributed to her faith sincere, thus her reply with accent sweet renewed. If this be our condition, thus to dwell in narrow circuits straitened by a foe, subtle or violent, we not endured single with like defence, wherever met, how are we happy still in fear of harm? But harm precedes not sin. Onely our foe tempting affronts us with his foul esteem of our integrity. His foul esteem sticks no dishonour on our front, but turns foul on himself. Then wherefore shunned or feared by us, who rather double honour gain from his surmise provided false, and find peace within, favour from heaven, our witness from the event? And what is love, faith, virtue, unassayed, alone, without exterior help sustained? Let us not then suspect our happy state left so imperfect by the Maker wise, as not to secure or single or combined. Frail is our happiness, if be this so, and Eden were no Eden thus exposed. To whom thus Adam fervently replied, O woman, best are all things as the will of God ordained them, his creating hand, nothing imperfect or deficient left of all that he created, much less man, or aught that he might his happy state secure from outward force. Within himself the danger lies, yet lies within his power. Against his will he can receive no harm. But God left free the will, for what obeys reason is free, and reason he made right. But bidder well beware, and still erect, at least by some fair appearing good surprised, she dictate false, and misinform the will to do what God expressly hath forbid. Not then mistrust, but tender love enjoins that I should mind thee oft, and mind thou me. Firm we subsist, yet possible to swerve, since reason not impossibly may meet some specious object by which the foe suborned, and fall into deception unaware, not keeping the strictest watch, as she was warned. Seek not temptation then, which to avoid were better, and most likely, if from me thou sever not, trial will come unsought. Wouldst thou approve thy constancy, approve thy first obedience? The other who can know, not seeing the attempted who attest. But if thou think trial unsought may find us both securer, then thus warned thou seemst. Go, for thy stay, not free, absence thee more. Go in thy native innocence, rely on what thou hast of virtue, summon all, for God towards thee hath done his part, do thine. So spake the patriarch of mankind, but Eve persisted, yet submissive, though last, replied. With thy permission then, and thus forewarned chiefly by what thy own last reasoning words touched onely, that our trial, when least sought, may find us both perhaps far less prepared, the willinger I go, not much expecting a foe so proud will first the weaker seek. So bent, the more shall shame him his repulse. And thus saying, from her husband's hand, her hand soft she withdrew, and like a wood nymph light, Oread or Dryad, or one of Delia's train, betook her to the groves, but Delia's self in gait surpassed, and goddess-like deport, though not as she with bow and quiver armed, but with gardening tools as are yet rude, guiltless of fire had formed, or angels brought, to Pales or Panoma thus adorned. Like she seemed Panoma when she fled, Vertumnus, or to Circe in her prime, yet virgin of Proserpina from Jove. Her long with ardent look his eye pursued, delighted, but desiring more her stay. Oft he to her his charge of quick return repeated, she to him is oft engaged to be returned by noon amid the bower, and of all things in best order to invite noontide repast, or afternoon's repose. O much deceived, much failing, hapless Eve, of thy presumed return, event perverse! Thou never from that hour in paradise found either sweet repast or found repose. Such ambush hid among sweet flowers and shades, waited with hellish rancour imminent, to intercept thy way or send thee back despoiled of innocence, of faith, of bliss. For now, and since first break of dawn upon the fiend, mere serpent in appearance, forth was come, and on his quest, where likeliest he might find the only two of mankind, but in them the whole included race, his purposed prey. In bower and field he sought, where any tuft of grove or garden plot more pleasant lay, their tendance or plantation for delight, by fountain or shady rivulet, he sought them both, but wished his hap might find Eve separate he wished, but not with hope of what so seldom chanced, when to his wish beyond his hope Eve separate he spies, veiled in a cloud of fragrance, where she stood half spied, so thick the roses brushing round about her glowed, oft stooping to support each flower of slender stalk, whose head, though gay carnation, purple, azure, or specked with gold, hung drooping unstained. Them she upstays gently with myrtle band, mindless the while herself, though fairest unsupported flower, from her best prop so far and storn so high. Nearer he drew, and many a walk traversed of stateliest covert, cedar or pine or palm, then voluble and bold, now hid, now seen among thick woven arborets and flowers, embroidered on each bank the hand of Eve. Spot more delicious than those gardens feigned of a revived Adonis, or renowned Alcinous, host of old Laertes' son, or that not mystic where the sapient king held dalliance with his fair Egyptian spouse. Much he the place admired, the person more, as one who long in populous city pent, where houses thick and sewers annoy the air, forth issuing on a summer's morn, to breathe among the pleasant villages and fairs, adjoined, from each thing met concave's delight, the smell of grain or tedded grass, or kine or dairy, each rural night, each rural sight and sound. If chance with nymph-like steps fair virgin pass, what pleasing seemed for her now pleases more, she most and in all her looks sums all delight. Such pleasure took the serpent to behold this flowery plat, the sweet recess of Eve thus early and thus alone, her heavenly form angelic, but more soft and feminine, her graceful innocence, her every air of gesture or lest action overwrought his malice, and with grin sweet bereaved his fierceness of the fierce intent it brought, that space the evil one abstracted stood from his own evil, and for the time remained stupidly good, of enmity disarmed, of guile, of hate, of envy, of revenge, by the hot hell that always in him burns, though in mid-heaven, soon ended his delight, and tortures him now more, the more he sees of pleasure not for him ordained. Then soon fierce hate he recollects, and all his thoughts of mischief, gratulating, thus excites.
Thoughts, whither have he led me? With what sweet compulsion thus transported to forget What hither brought us? Hate, not love nor hope, of paradise for hell, hope here to taste, of pleasure, but all pleasure to destroy, save what is in destroying, other joy to me is lost. Then let me not let pass occasion which now smiles. Behold alone the woman, opportune to all attempts, her husband, for I view far round, not nigh, whose higher intellectual more I shun, and strength of courage haughty, and of limb heroic built, though of terrestrial mould, foe not informidable, exempt from wound, I not. So much hath hell debased, and pain enfeebled me, to what I was in heaven. She fair, divinely fair, fit love for gods, not terrible, though terror be in love and beauty, not approached by stronger hate, hate stronger under show of love well feigned, the way to her which ruin now I tend. So spake the enemy of mankind, enclosed in serpent, intimate bad, and toward Eve addressed his way, not with indented wave prone on the ground, as since, but on his rear, circular base of rising folds, that toured fold above fold, a surging maze, his head crested aloft, and carbuncle his eyes, with burnished neck of verdant gold, erect amidst his circling spires, that on the grass floated redundant. Pleasing was his shape, and lovely, never since of serpent kind, lovelier, not those that in Illyria changed, Hermione and Cadmus, or the god in Epidaurus, nor to which transformed Ammonian Jove, or Capitoline was seen, he with Olympius, this with her who bore Scipio, the height of Rome. With tract oblique at first, as one who sought access, but feared to interrupt, sidelong he works his way, and as when a ship by skilful steersmen wrought nigh river's mouth or foreland, where the wind veers aloft, as oft so steers, and shifts her sail, so varied he, and of his tortuous train curled many a wanton wreath in sight of Eve to lure her eye. She busied heard the sound of rustling leaves, but minded not, as used to such disport before her, through the field from every beast, more duteous at her call than at Circean call the herd undisguised. He bolder now, uncalled before her stood, but as in gaze admiring, oft he bowed his turret crest and sleek enamelled neck, fawning, and licked the ground whereupon she trod. His gentle dumb expression turned at length the eye of Eve to mark his play, and he was glad of her attention gained, with serpent tongue organic or impulsive vocal air, his fraudulent temptation thus began. Wonder not, sovereign mistress, if perhaps thou canst, who art sole wonder, much less arm thy looks, the heaven of mildness, with disdain, displeased, that I approach thee thus, and gaze insatiate, I thus single, nor have feared thy awful brow, more awful thus retired. Fairest resemblance of thy Maker fair, thee all living things gaze on, all things thine, by gift and thy celestial beauty, adore with ravishment beheld. There best beheld where universally admired, but here in this enclosure wild, these beasts among, beholders shrewd and shallow to discern, half what in thee is fair, one man except who sees thee. And what is one, who shouldst be seen, a goddess among gods, adored and served by angels numberless thy daily train? So glozed the tempter, and his proem tuned into the heart of Eve his words made way, though at the voice much marvelling, at length not unamazed, she thus in answer spake. What may this mean? Language of man pronounced by tongue of brute, and human sense expressed? The first at least of these I thought denied to beast, whom God on their creation day created mute to all articulate sound. The latter I demur, for in their looks much reason, and in their actions oft appeared. Thee, serpent, subtlest beast of all the field I knew, but not with human voice endued. Redouble then this miracle, and say, how canst thou speakable of mute, and how to me so friendly grown above the rest of brutal kind that daily are in sight? Say, for such wonder claims attention due. To whom the guileful tempter thus replied, Empress of this fair world, resplendent Eve, easy
easy to me it is to tell thee all what thou command'st, and right thou shouldst be obeyed. I was at first as other beasts that graze the trodden herb of abject thoughts and low, as was my food, nor aught but food discerned, or sex, but apprehended nothing high, till on a day roving the field I chanced a goodly tree, far distant to behold, loaden with fruit of fairest colours, mixed, ruddy and gold. I nearer drew to gaze, when from the boughs a savoury odour blown, graceful to appetite, more pleased my sense than the smell of sweetest fennel, or the teats of ewe or goat, or dropping with milk at even, unsucked of lamb or kid that tend their play, to satisfy the sharp desire I had of tasting those fair apples. I resolved not to defer, hunger and thirst at once powerful persuaders, quickened at the scent of that alluring fruit, urged me on so keen. About the mossy trunk I wound me soon, for high from ground the branches would require thy utmost reach or atoms. Round the tree all other beasts that saw, with me like desire, longing and envying stood, but could not reach. Amid the tree now got where plenty hung, tempting so nigh to pluck and eat my fill, I spared not, for such pleasure till that hour of feed or fountain never had I found. Sated at length, ere long I might perceive strange alteration in me, to degree of reason in my inward powers, and speech not wanted long, though to this shape retained. Thenceforth to speculations high or deep I turned my thoughts, and with capacious mind considered all things visible in heaven, or earth, or middle, all things fair and good. But all that fair and good in thy divine semblance, and in thy beauty's heavenly ray, united I beheld, no fair to thine equivalent or second, which compelled me thus, though in portion perhaps, to come and gaze and worship thee of right declared sovereign of creatures, universal dame. So talked the spirited sly snake, and Eve, yet more amazed, unwary, thus replied, Serpent, thy overpraising leaves in doubt the virtue of that fruit in thee first proved. But say, where grows the tree? From hence how far? For many are the trees of God that grow in paradise, and various yet unknown to us. In such abundance lies our choice, as leaves a greater store of fruit untouched, still hanging uncorruptible, till men grow up to their provision, and more hands help to disburden nature of her birth. To whom the wily adder, blithe and glad, Empress, the way is ready, and not long. Beyond a row of myrtles on a flat fast by mountain, one small thicket past, of blowing myrrh and balm. If thou accept my conduct, I can bring thee thither soon. Lead then, said he. And he, leading swiftly, rolled in tangles, and make intricate seams straight, to mischief swift. Hope elevates and joy brightens his crest, as when a wandering fire, compact of unctuous vapor? Unctuous? That's a good word, unctuous. As when a wandering fire, compact of unctuous vapor, which the night condenses, and the cold environs round, kindled through agitation to a flame, which oft, they say, some evil spirit attends, hovering and blazing with delusive light, misleads the amazed night-wanderer from his way to bogs and mires, and oft through pond or pool, there swallowed up and lost from succour far. So glistered the dire snake, and into fraud led Eve, our credulous mother, to the tree of prohibition, root of all our woe, which when she saw, thus to her guide she spake, Serpent, we might have spared our coming hither, fruitless to me, though fruit be here to excess, the credit of those whose virtue rests with thee, wondrous indeed, if cause of such effects, but of this tree we may not taste or touch. God so commanded, and left that command sole daughter of his voice. The rest we live law to ourselves, our reason is our law. To whom the tempter guilefully replied, Indeed, hath God then said that of the tree of all this garden trees you shall not eat, yet lords declared of all in earth or air? To whom Eve, thus yet sinless, of the fruit. Of the fruit of each tree in the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of this fair tree amidst the garden God hath said, Ye shall not eat thereof, nor shall ye touch it, lest ye die. She scarce had said, though brief, when now more bold the tempter, but with show of zeal and love to man, and indignation at his wrong, new parts put on, and as to passion moved, fluctuates disturbed, yet comely, in act and raised, as of some great matter to begin. As when of some old orator renowned in Athens or free Rome, where eloquence flourished, since mute, to some great cause addressed, stood in himself collected, while each part, motion, each act, one audience ere the tongue. Sometimes in height begin, as no delay of preface brooking through his zeal of right, so standing, moving, or to height upgrown the tempter all impassioned, thus began. O sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, mother of science, now I feel thy power within me clear, not only to discern things and their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents, deemed however wise. Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How could ye? By the fruit? It gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener? Look on me who have touched and tasted, yet both live. And life more perfect they've attained than fate meant me by venturing higher than my lot. Shall that be shut to man which to the beast is open? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass, and not praise rather your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced, whatever thing death be, deterred from not achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil, of good how just, of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned? God therefore cannot hurt ye, and be just, not God. Not feared then, nor obeyed. Your fear itself of death removes the fear. Why was this forbid? Why but to awe? Why but to keep you low and ignorant his worshippers? He knows that in the day ye eat thereof, your eyes that seem so clear, yet are but dim, shall perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil as they know. That ye should be as gods, since I as man, eternal man, is but proportion meet, I of brute human, ye of human gods. So ye shall die, perhaps, by putting off human, to putting on gods, death to be wished, though threatened, which no worse can this bring. And what are gods, that man may not become as they, participating God-like food? The gods are first, and that advantage use on our belief, and that all from them proceeds. I question it, for this fair earth I see, warmed by the sun, producing every kind, then nothing, if they all things who enclose to knowledge of good and evil in this tree, that whoso eats thereof, forthwith attains wisdom without their leave. And wherein lies the offence, that man should thus attain to know? What can your knowledge hurt him, or this tree impart against his will, if all be his? Or is it envy, and can envy dwell in heavenly breasts? These, and many more causes, import your need of this fair fruit. God is human, reach then, and freely taste. And thus he ended, and his words replete with guile into her heart, too easy entrance won. Fixed on the fruit she gazed, which to behold might tempt alone, and in her ears the sound yet rung of his persuasive words, impregnant with reason to her seeming, and with truth. Meanwhile the hour of noon drew on, and waked an eager appetite, raised by the smell so savoury of that fruit, with which desire, inclinable now grown to touch or taste, solicited her longing eye. Yet first pausing awhile, thus to herself she mused, Great are thy virtues, doubtless best of fruits, though kept from man, and worthy to be admired, whose taste, too long forborne at first to say, gave elocution to the mute, and taught the tongue not made for speech to speak thy praise. Thy praise he also who forbids thy use conceals not from us, naming the tree of knowledge, knowledge of both good and evil. Forbids us then to taste, but his forbidding commends thee more, while it infers the good by thee communicated, and our want for a good unknown sure is not had, or had and yet unknown, as not bad at all. In plain, then, what forbids he but to know, forbids us good, forbids us to be wise? Such prohibitions bind not. But if death bind us with afterbands, what profits then our inward freedom? In the day we eat of this fair fruit, our doom is, we shall die. How dies the serpent? He hath eaten and lives and knows and speaks and reasons and discerns, irrational till then. For us alone was death invented? Or to us denied this intellectual food for beasts reserved? For beasts it seems, yet that one beast which first hath tasted envies not, but brings with joy the good befallen him. Author unsuspect, friendly to man, far from deceit or guile. What fear I then, rather than what know to fear under this ignorance of good and evil, of God or death, of law or penalty? Here grows the cure of all, this fruit divine, fair to the eye, inviting to the taste of virtue to make wise. What hinders then to reach and feed at once both body and mind? So saying, her rash hand in evil hour, forth reaching to the fruit, she plucked and ate. Earth felt the wound, and nature from her seat, sighing, through all her works gave signs of woe, that all was lost. Back to the thicket slunk the guilty serpent, and well might, for Eve, intent now wholly on her taste, naught else regarded, such delight till then, as seemed in fruit she'd never tasted, whether true or fancied so, through expectation high of knowledge, nor was Godhead from her thought. Greedily she engorged without restraint, and knew not eating death, satiated at length, and heightened as with wine, jocund and boon, thus to herself she pleasantly began. O sovereign, virtuous, precious of all trees in paradise, of operation blessed sapience, hitherto obscured and famed, and thy fair fruit let hang, as to no end created, but henceforth my early care, not without song each morning, and due praise shall tend thee, and the fertile burden ease of thy full branches offered free to all, till dieted by thee I grow mature in knowledge, as the gods who know all things know. Though others envy what they cannot give, for had the gift been theirs, it had not here thus grown. Experience that next to thee I owe best guide. Not following thee I remained in ignorance. Thou openest wisdom's in way, and givest access. Though secret she retire, and perhaps I am secret. Heaven is high, high and remote to see from this distinct. Each thing on earth, and other care perhaps may have diverted from continual watch our great forbidder, safe with all his spies about him. But to Adam in what sort shall I appear? Shall I to him make known as yet my change, and give to him partake full happiness with me, or rather not, but keep the odds of knowledge in my power without co-partner? So to add what wants in female sex, the more to draw his love, and render me more equal, and perhaps a thing not undesirable, sometimes superior for inferior who is free. This may be well, but what if God had seen and death ensue? Then I shall be no more, and Adam wedded to another Eve, shall live with her enjoying, I extinct. A death to think. Confirmed me then I resolve, Adam shall share with me in bliss or woe. So dear I love him, that with him all deaths I could endure, without him live no life. And so saying, from the tree her steps she turned, but first low reverence dawned as to the power that dwelt within, whose presence had infused into the plant sciential sap, derived from nectar, drink of gods. Adam, the while, was waiting desirous her return, had wove of the choicest flowers a garland to adorn her tresses, and her rural labours, as reapers are, oft want their harvest queen. Great joy he promised to his thoughts, and new solace in her return, so long delayed, and yet oft his heart divine of something ill misgave him. He the faltering measure felt, and forth to meet her went, the way she took that morn when they first parted. By the tree of knowledge he must pass. There he her met, scarce from the tree returning, in her hand a bough of the fairest fruit that downy smiled, new gathered and ambrosial smell diffused. To him she hasted, in her face excuse came prologue, and apology to prompt, with which bland words at will she thus addressed. Hast thou not wondered, Adam, at my stay? Thee I've missed, and thought it long to prive thy presence, agony of love till now, nor felt, nor shall be twice, for nevermore mean I to try of what rash untried I sought, the pain of absence from thy sight. But strange hath been the cause, and wonderful to hear. This tree is not, as we are told, a tree of danger tasted, nor to evil unknown opening the way, but of divine effect to open eyes, and make them gods who taste. And hath been tasted such the serpent wiser, not restrained as we, or not obeying, hath eaten the fruit, and is become, not dead as we are threatened, but henceforth endued with human voice and human reason and sense, reasoning to admiration, and with me persuasively hath so prevailed, that I have also tasted, and have also found the effects to correspond, opener mine eyes, dim erst dilated spirits, ampler heart, and growing up to Godhead, for which thee chiefly I sought, without thee can despise. For bliss, as thou hast part, to me is bliss, tedious, unshared with thee, and odious soon. Thou therefore also taste that equal lot, may join us, equal joy as equal love, least thou not tasting, different degree disjoin us, and that I too late renounce deity for thee, when fate will not permit. And thus Eve with countenance blithe her story told, but in her cheek distemper flushing glowed. On the other side, Adam, soon as he heard the fatal trespass down by Eve, amazed, astonished, and stood blank, while horror chill ran through his veins, and all his joints relaxed. From his slack hand the garland wreathed for Eve down dropped, and all the faded roses shed. Speechless he stood, and pale, till thus at length, first to himself, he inward silence broke. O fairest of creation, last and best of all God's works, creature in whom excelled whatever can to fight or thought be found, holy, divine, good, amiable, or sweet, how art thou lost? How on a sudden loss, defaced, deflowered, and now to death devote? Rather, how hast thou yielded to transgress the strict forbiddance, how to violate the sacred fruit forbidden? Some cursed fraud of enemy hath beguiled thee, yet unknown, and me with thee hath ruined, for with thee certain my resolution is to die. How can I live without thee? How forego thy sweet converse and love so dearly joined, to live again in these wild woods forlorn? Should God create another Eve, and I another rib afford? Yet loss of thee would never from my heart. No, I feel the link of nature draw me, flesh of flesh, bone of my bone you art, and from thy state mine shall never be parted, bliss or woe. So having said, as one from sad dismay recomforted, and after thoughts disturbed, submitting to what seemed remediless, thus in calm mood his words to Eve he turned. Bold deed thou hast presumed, adventurous Eve, and peril great provoked, who thus hast dared, had it been wanly converting to eye that sacred fruit, sacred to abstinence, much more to taste it under ban to touch, but past who can recall, or done undo? Not God omnipotent, for fate, yet so, perhaps thou shalt not die, perhaps the fact is not so heinous now, for tasted fruit profaned first by the serpent, by him first made common and unhallowed, ere one tastes, nor yet on him found deadly, he yet lives as thou saidst, and gains to live as man higher degree of life, inducement strong to us, as likely tasting to attain proportional assent, which cannot be but to gods or angels demigods. Nor can I think that God, creator wise, though threatening, will in earnest so destroy us as prime's creatures, dignified so high, set over all his works, in which our fall for us created, needs with us must fail, dependent made. So God shall uncreate, be frustrate, do, undo, and labor loose, not well conceived of God, who through his power creation could repeat, yet would be loath to us to abolish. Least the adversary triumph, and say they're fickle their state, whom God most favors, who can please him long. Me first he ruined, now mankind. Whom will he next? Matter of scorn, not to be given the foe. However, I with thee have fixed my lot, certain to undergo like doom, if death consort with thee. Death is to me as to life. So forcible within my heart I feel the bond of nature draw me to my own, my own and thee, for what thou art is mine. Our date cannot be severed. We are one flesh. To lose thee were to lose myself. And so Adam said, and thus to Eve him replied. O glorious trial of exceeding love, illustrious evidence, example high, engaging me to emulate, but short of thy perfection how shall I attain, Adam, from whose dear side I boast me sprung, and gladly of our union hear thee speak, one heart, one soul in both, whereof good proof this day affords, declaring thee resolved rather than death or aught than death more dread shall separate us, linked in love so dear, to undergo with me one guilt, one crime, if any be, of tasting this fair fruit, whose virtue, for of good still good proceeds, direct or by occasion hath presented this happy trial of thy love, which else so eminently never had been known. Were it I thought death menaced would ensue this my attempt, I would sustain alone the worst, not persuade thee, rather die deserted, than oblige thee with a fact pernicious to thy peace, chiefly assured remarkably so late of thy so true, so faithful love unequalled. But I feel far otherwise the event, not death but life augmented. Opened eyes, new hopes, new joys, tastes so divine, that would have sweet before hath touched my sense, flat seems to this and harsh. On my experience, Adam, freely taste, and fear of death delivered the winds. And so saying, she embraced him, and for joy tenderly wept. Such much one that his love had so ennobled, as of choice to incur divine displeasure for her sake, or death. In recompense for such compliance bade such recompense best merits. From the bough she gave him of that fair enticing fruit with liberal hand. He scrupled not to eat against his better knowledge, not deceived, but fondly overcome with female charm. Earth again trembled from her entrails, as again in pangs and nature gave a second groan. The sky lowered, and muttering thunder, some sad drops wept the completing of the mortal's sin original. While Adam took no thought eating his fill, nor Eve to iterate her former trespass feared, the more to soothe him with her loved society, that now as with new wine intoxicated both they swim in mirth, and fancy that they feel divinity within them breeding wings, wherewith to scorn the earth. But that false fruit far their operation first displayed, carnal desire inflaming, he on Eve began to cast lascivious eyes, she him as wantonly repaid. In lust they burn, till Adam thus again Eve to dalliance move. Eve, I see thou art exact of taste, and elegant of sapience, no small part, since to each meeting savour we apply, and palate call judicious. I the praise yield thee, so well on this day thou hast purveyed. Much pleasure we have lost while we abstain from this delightful fruit, nor known till now true relish tasting. If such pleasure be in things to us forbidden, it might be wished for this one tree had been forbidden 10. But come, so well refreshed, now let us play, as meet is after such delicious fare. For never did thy beauty, since the day I saw thee first and wedded thee, adorned with all perfections, so inflame my sense with ardour to enjoy thee fairer now than ever the bounty of this virtuous tree. So said he, and forebode not glance nor toy of amorous intent, well understood of Eve, whose eye darted contagious fire. Her hand he seized, and to a shady bank, thick overhead with verdant roof embowered, he led her nothing loath. Flowers were the couch, pansies, and violets, and asphodel, and hyacinth, earth's freshest, softest lap. They their fill of love and love's disport took largely, of their mutual guilt the seal, the solace of their sin, till dewy sleep oppressed them, wearied with their amorous play. Soon as the force of that fallacious fruit, that with exhilarating vapour bland about their spirits had played, and inmost powers made air, was now exhaled, and grosser sleep bred of unkindly fumes, with conscious dreams encumbered, now had left them. Up they rose as from unrest, and each the other viewing, soon found their eyes how opened, and their minds how darkened. Innocence, that as a veil had shadowed them from knowing ill, was gone. just confidence, and native righteousness, and honor from about them. Naked left to guilty shame he covered, but his robe uncovered more. So rose the day-night strong Herculean Samson from the harlot laugh of the Philistine, Delilah, and wake shorn of his strength, they destitute and bare of all their virtue. Silent and in face confounded long they sate, as struck and mute, till Adam, though not less than Eve abashed, at length gave utterance to these words constrained. O Eve, an evil hour, thou didst give care to that false worm, of whomsoever taught to counterfeit man's voice, true in our fall, false in our promised rising. Since our eyes opened we find indeed, and find we know both good and evil, good lost and evil got, bad fruit of knowledge, if this be to know what leaves us naked thus, of honor void of innocence, of faith, of purity, our wonted ornaments now soiled and stained, and our faces evident the signs of foul consubsistence, of foul consubsistence, whence evil store, even shame, the last of evils, the first be sure then. How shall I behold the face henceforth of God or angel, erst with joy and rapture so oft beheld? Those heavenly shapes will dazzle now this earthly with their blaze insufferably bright. O might I here in solitude live savage, in some glad obscured, or highest woods impenetrable to star or sunlight, spread their umbrage broad and brown as evening. Cover me, ye pines, and ye cedars with innumerable boughs, hide me, where I may never see them more. But let us now, as in bad plight, devise what best may, for the present serve to hide the parts of each from other, that seem most to shame obnoxious, and unseemliest seen. Some tree whose broad smooth leaves together sewed, and girded on our loins, may cover round those middle parts, that this new comer shame there sit not and reproach us as unclean. So counselled he, and both together they went into the thickest wood, where there soon they chose the fig tree, not that kind for fruit renowned, but such as at this day to Indians known, and Malabar or Deccan spreads her arms, branching so broad and long, that in the ground the bended twigs take root, and their daughters grow about the mother tree, a pillared shade high overarched, and echoing walks between. Thereof the Indian herdsman, shunning heat, shelters in the cool, and tends his pasturing herds at loopholes cut through the thickest shade. Those leaves they gathered, broad as Amazonian targe, and with what skill they had, together sewed, to gird their waist, vain covering as if to hide their guilt and dreaded shame. Oh, how unlike to that first naked glory! Such of late Columbus found the American to girt with feathered cincture, naked else and wild, among the trees on isles and woody shores. Thus fenced, and, as they thought, their shame in part covered, but not at rest or at ease of mind, they sate them down to weep. Nor only tears rained at their eyes, but high winds worse within began to rise, high passions, anger, hate, mistrust, suspicion, discord, and shook sore their inward state of mind, calm region once and full of peace, now tossed and turbulent, for understanding ruled not, and the will heard not her lore, both in subjection now to sensual appetite, who from beneath usurping over sovereign reason, claimed superior sway. From thus distempered breast, Adam estranged in look and altered style, speech intermitted thus, to Eve renewed. Wouldst thou hast hearkened to my words and stayed with me, as I besought thee, when that strange desire of wandering this unhappy morn, I know not whence possessed thee, we had then remained still happy, not as now, despoiled of all our good, shamed, naked, miserable. Let none henceforth seek needless cause to approve thy faith, the faith they owe. When earnestly they seek such proof, conclude, then they begin to fail. To whom soon moved with touch of blame, thus Eve. What words have passed thy lips, Adam, severe? Imputest thou that to my default, or will of wandering, as thou call'st it, which who knows but might as ill have happened thou being by, or to thyself perhaps? Hadst thou been there, or bear the attempt, thou couldst not have discerned fraud in the serpent, speaking as he spake, no ground of enmity between us known. Why should he mean me ill, or seek to harm? Was I to have never parted from thy side, as good have grown there, still a liveless rib? Being as I am, why didst thou not the head command me absolutely to not going into danger as thou sayest? Too facile then thou didst not much gainsay, nay, didst permit, approve, and fair dismiss. Hadst thou been firm and fixed in the dissent, neither had I transgressed nor thou with me. To whom then first incensed Adam replied, Is this the love, is this the recompense of mine to thee, ingrateful Eve, expressed immutable when thou wert lost? Not I, who might have lived and enjoyed immortal bliss, yet willingly chose rather death with thee. And now I am upbraided as the cause of thy transgressing. Not enough severe, it seems, in thy restraint. What could I more? I warned thee, I admonished thee, foretold the danger, and the lurking enemy that lie in wait. Beyond this had been force, and force upon thee free will hath here no place. But confidence there then bore thee on, secure either to meet no danger or to find matter of glorious trial. And perhaps I also erred in overmuch admiring what seemed in thee so perfect, that I thought no evil durst attempt thee. But I rue that error now, which has become my crime, and thou the accuser. Thus it shall befall him who, to worth and women overtrusting, lets her will rule. Restraint she will not brook, and left to herself, if evil thence ensue, she his first weak indulgence shall accuse. Thus they in mutual accusation spent the fruitless hours, but neither self-condemning, and of their vain contest appeared no end. Alright, folks, before we get into Chapter 9, we're about an hour in. I'm going to suggest that we take a short intermission at this point. Maybe get up, have a snack if you've got the calories for it. Definitely drink some water. Hydration is important. You gotta do that. And perhaps if you've been sitting still, get up and move around. It's not good to sit still for too long. Anyway, I'll see you guys in a few. Chapter 9. Meanwhile, the heinous and despiteful act of Satan, done in paradise, and how he and the serpent had perverted Eve, her husband, she, to taste the fatal fruit, was known in heaven. For what can escape the eye of God all-seeing, or deceive his heart omniscient, who in all things wise and just, hindered not Satan to attempt the mind of man, with strength entire and free will armed, complete to have discovered and repulsed whatever wiles of foe or seeming friend. For still they knew, and ought to have still remembered, the high injunction not to taste that fruit, whoever tempted, which they not obeying incurred. What could they less the penalty and manifold in sin deserved to fall? Up into heaven from paradise in haste the angelic guards ascended, mute and sad for man, for of his state by this they knew, much wondering how the subtle fiend had stolen entrance unseen. Soon as the unwelcome news from earth arrived at heaven's gate, displeased all were who heard, dim sadness did not spare that time celestial visages, yet mixed with pity violated not their bliss. About the new arrived, in multitudes the ethereal people ran, to hear and to know how all befell. They towards the throne supreme accountable made haste to make appear with a righteous plea their utmost vigilance, and easily approved, when the Most High, Eternal Father, from his secret cloud amidst in thunder, uttered thus his voice.
Assembled angels, and ye powers returned from unsuccessful charge, be not dismayed, nor troubled. These tidings from the earth which your sincerest care could not prevent, foretold so lately what would come to pass, when first this tempter crossed the gulf from hell. I told ye, then he should prevail and speed on his bad errand. Man should be seduced and flattered out of all believing lies against his Maker. No decree of mine concurring to necessitate his fall, or touched with lightest moment of impulse his free will to her own inclining left in even scale. But fallen he is, and now what rests but that the mortal sentence pass on his transgression, death denounced that day, which he presumes already vain and void, because not yet inflicted, as he feared, by some immediate stroke. But soon shall find forbearance no acquittance, ere day end. Justice shall not return as bounty scorned. But whom send I to judge them? Whom but thee, vicegerent's son? To thee I have transferred all judgment, whether in heaven or earth or hell. Easy it may be seen that I intend Mercy College for the justice, sending thee man's friend his mediator to design, his design both ransomed and redeemer voluntary, and destined man himself to judge man fallen.
So spake the Father, and unfolding bright toward the right hand his glory, on the sun blazed forth unclouded deity. He full resplendent all his Father manifest expressed, and thus divinely answered mild. Father eternal, thine is to decree, mine both in heaven and earth to do thy will supreme, that thou in me, thy Son beloved, mayst ever rest well pleased. I go to judge on earth these thy transgressors, but thou know'st, whoever judged, the worst on me must light, when time shall be, for so I undertook before thee, and not repenting this obtain of right, that I may mitigate their doom on me derived, yet I shall temper so justice with mercy, as may illustrate most them fully satisfied, and thee appease. Attendants none shall need, nor train where none are to behold the judgment, but is to be judged. These two, the third best absent is condemned, convict by flight, and rebel to all law. Conviction to the serpent none belongs. And thus saying, from his radiant seat he rose, of high collateral glory, him thrones and powers, princedoms and dominations mistrant, accompanied to heaven's gate, from whence Eden and all the coast in prospect lay. Down he descended straight, the speed of God's time counts not, though with swiftest minutes winged. Now was the sun in western cadence low from noon, and gentle airs due at their hour to fan the earth now waked, and ushered in the evening cool, when he from wrath more cool came the mild judge and intercessor, both to sentence man. The voice of God they heard, now walking in the garden, by soft winds brought to their ears. While day declined, they heard, and from his presence hid themselves among the thickest trees, both man and wife, till God approaching, thus to Adam called aloud.
Where art thou, Adam? Wont with joy to meet my coming, seen far off. I miss thee here, not pleased to thus entertain with solitude, where obvious duty erewhile appeared unsought. Or I come less conspicuous, or what change absents thee, or what chance detains? Come forth.
Yet he came, and with him Eve, more loath, though first to offend, discountenanced both, and discomposed. Love was not in their looks, either to God or to each other, but apparently guilt, and shame, and perturbation, and despair, anger, and obstinacy, and hate, and guile. Whence Adam, faltering long, thus answered brief. I heard thee in the garden, and of thy voice afraid, being naked, hid myself. To whom the gracious judge without revile... No, he just said that one sentence. To whom the gracious judge without revile replied,
My voice thou often hast heard, and hast not feared, but still rejoiced. How is it now become so dreadful to thee? That thou art naked, who hath told thee? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I gave thee charge thou shouldst not eat?
To whom thus Adam sore beset replied, O heaven, in evil strait this day I stand before my judge, either to undergo myself the total crime, or to accuse my other self, the partner of my life, whose failing, while her faith to me remains, I should conceal, and not expose to blame by my complaint. But strict necessity subdues me, and calamitous constraint. Least on my head both sin and punishment, however insupportable, be all devolved. Though should I hold my peace, yet thou would easily detect what I conceal. This woman whom thou madest to be my help, and gavest me as thy perfect gift, so good, so fit, so acceptable, so divine, that from her hand I could suspect no ill, and what she did, whatever in itself, her doing seemed to justify the deed. She gave me of the tree, and I did eat. To whom the sovereign presence thus replied,
Was she thy God that thou didst obey before his voice, or was she made thy guide superior, or but equal, that to her thou didst resign thy manhood, and the place wherein God set thee above her made of thee, and for thee whose perfection far excelled hers in all real dignity? Adorned she was indeed, and lovely to attract thy love, not thy subjection, and her gifts were such as under government well seemed, unseemly to bear rule, which was thy part and person, hadst thou known thyself aright.
So having said, he thus to Eve in few,
Say, woman, what is this which thou hast done?
to whom said Eve, with shame nigh overwhelmed, confessing soon, yet not before her judge, bold or loquacious, thus abashed replied, The serpent me beguiled, and I did eat. Which when the Lord heard, without delay, to judgment he proceeded on the accused serpent, though brute, unable to transfer the guilt on him who made him instrument of mischief, and polluted from the end of his creation, justly then accursed as vitiated in nature, more to no concerned not man, since he no further knew, nor altered his offence. Yet God at last to Satan first in sin his doom applied, though in mysterious terms judged as the best, and on the serpent thus his curse let fall. Because thou hast done this, thou art accursed above all cattle, each beast of the field. Upon thy belly grovelling thou shalt go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Between thee and the woman I will put enmity, and between thine and her seed shall bruise thy head, and thou bruise his heel. So spake the oracle, then verified when Jesus, son of Mary, second Eve, saw Satan fall like lightning down from heaven, prince of the air, and then rising from his grave, spoiled principalities and powers, triumphed in open show, and with ascension bright, captivity led captive through the air, the realm itself of Satan long usurped, whom we shall tread at last under our feet, even he who now foretold his fatal bruise, and to the woman thus his sentence turn.
Thy sorrow I shall greatly multiply by thy conception. Children thou shalt bring in sorrow forth, and to thy husband's will thine shall submit. He over thee shall rule.
And on Adam thus judgment he pronounced. Or on Adam, lastly, thus judgment he pronounced.
Because thou hast hearkened to the voice of thy wife, and eaten of the tree concerning which I charged thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat thereof, cursed is the ground for thy sake. Thou in sorrow shalt eat thereof of all days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles it shall bring thee forth unbidden, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field, and the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return to the ground, for thou out of the ground wast taken. Know thy birth, for know thy dust thou art, and shalt to dust return.
So judged he man, both judge and Saviour sent, and the instant stroke of death denounced that day, removed far off. Then pitying how they stood before him, naked to the air, now that must suffer change, disdained not to begin thenceforth the form of servant to assume, as when he washed his servant's feet. So now, as father of his family, he clad the nakedness with skins of beasts or slain, or as the snake with youthful coat repaid, and thought not much to clothe his enemies. Nor he their outward onely, with the skins of beasts, but inward nakedness, much more opprobrious, with his robe of righteousness, arraying covered from his father's sight. To him with swift ascent he up returned, into his blissful bosom, resumed in glory as of old, to him appeased, all, though all-knowing, what had passed with man recounted, mixing intercession sweet. Meanwhile, ere thus was sinned and judged on earth, within the gates of hell sate sin and death. In counterview within the gates, that now stood open wide, belching outrageous flame far into chaos, since the fiend passed through, sin opening who thus now to death began. O son, why sit we here each other viewing idly, while Satan our great author thrives in other worlds, and happier seat provides for his offspring dear? It cannot be but that success attends him. If mishap ere this he'd returned, with fury driven by his avenger, no place like this can fit his punishment, or their revenge. Methinks I feel new strength within me rise, wings growing, and dominion given me large beyond this deep. Whatever draws me on, our sympathy, or some connatural force, powerful at greatest distance to unite with secret amity of things like kind by secretest conveyance. Thou, my shade inseparable, must with me along, for death from sin no power can separate. but least the difficulty of passing back stay his return, perhaps over this gulf impassable, impervious. Let us try adventurous work, yet to thy power and mine not agreeable, to found a path over this main from hell to that new world, where Satan now prevails, a monument of merit hide all the infernal host, easing their passage thence for intercourse or transmigration, as their lot shall lead. Nor can I miss the way, so strongly drawn by this new-felt attraction and instinct. Whom thus the meagre shadow answered soon. Go whither fate and inclination strong leads thee. I shall not lag behind, nor ere the way thou leading such ascent I draw of carnage, prey innumerable, and taste the savour of death from all things there that live. Nor shall I to the work thou enterprisest be wanting, but afford thee equal aid. And so saying, with delight he snuffed the smell of mortal change on earth, as when a flock of ravenous fowl, though many a league remote, against the day of battle to a field where armies lie encamped, come flying, lured with scent of living carcasses, designed for death, the following day in bloody fight. So scented the grim feature, and upturned his nostril wide into the murky air, sagacious of his quarry from so far, and then both from out the hell gates into the waste, wild anarchy of chaos damp and dark flew divers, and with power, their power was great, hovering upon the waters, where they met, solid or slimy, as in raging sea, tossed up and down, together crowded, drove from each side, shoaling towards the mouth of hell. As when two polar winds blowing adverse upon the Cronian sea, together drive mountains of ice, but stop the imagined way beyond Patsora eastward, to the rich Cathanian coast. The aggregated soil death with his mace petrific, cold and dry as with a trident smoke, and fixed as firm as Delos floating once. The rest is look bound with Gorgonian rigour, not to move, and with asphaltic slime, broad as the gate, deep to the roots of hell the gathered beach they fastened, and the mole immense wrought on over the foaming deep high-arched. A bridge of length prodigious, joining to the wall immovable of now this fenceless world forfeit to death, from hence a passage broad, smooth, easy, inoffensive, down to hell. So if great things to small may be compared, Xerxes, the liberty of Greece to yoke, from Susa his Memnonian palace, high came to the sea, and over Hellespont bringing his way, Europe with Asia joined, and scourged with many a stroke the indignant waves. Now had they brought the work by wondrous art pontifical, a ridge of pendant rock over the next of vexed abyss, following the track of Satan to the self-same place where he first lighted from his wing, and landed safe from out of chaos, to the outside bare of this round world. With pins of adamant and chains they all made fast, too fast they made endurable. And now in little space the confines met of empyrean heaven and of this world, and on the left land hell, with long reach interposed. 3 several ways and light to each of these places led, and now their way to earth they had descried, to paradise first tending, when behold Satan, in likeness of an angel, bright between the Centauri and the Scorpion steering his zenith, while when the sun in Aries rose, disguised he came, but those his children dear their parents soon discerned, though in disguise. He, after Eve seduced, unminded, slunk to the wood fast by, and changing shape to observe the sequel, saw his guileful act by Eve, though all unweeting, seconded upon her husband, saw their shame that sought vain covertures. But when he saw descend the Son of God to judge them, terrified he fled, not hoping to escape, but shunned the present, fearing guilty what his wrath might suddenly inflict. That pass returned by night, and listening where the hapless pair sate in their sad discourse and various plaint, thence gathered his own doom, which understood not instant, but of future time. With joy and tidings fraught, to hell he now returned, and at the brink of chaos, near the foot of this wondrous new pontifice, unhoped met, who to meet him came, his offspring dear. Great joy was at their meeting, and at the sight of the stupendous bridge his joy increased. Long he admiring stood, till Sin, his fair enchanting daughter, thus the silence broke. "O parent, these are thy magnific deeds, thy trophies which thou view'st as not thine own. Thou art their author and prime architect. For I no sooner in my heart divined my heart, which by a secret harmony which still moves with thine, joined in connection sweet, that thou on earth hast prospered, which thy looks now also evidence. But straight I felt, though distance from these worlds between, yet I felt that I must after thee with this thy son. Such fatal consequences unite us three. Hell could no longer hold us in her bounds, nor this unvoyageable gulf obscure detain from following thy illustrious track. Thou hast achieved our liberty, confined within hell gates till now. Thou hast empowered to fortify thus far, and overlay with this portentous bridge the dark abyss. Thine now is all this world, thy virtue hath won what thy hands builded not, thy wisdom gained with odds what war had lost, and fully avenged our foil in earth, and our foil in heaven. Here thou shalt monarch reign, thou didst not, there let him still victor sway, as battle hath adjudged from this new world, retiring by his own doom alienated, and henceforth monarchy, with thee divide of all things, parted by the imperial bounds as quadrature from thy orbicular world, or try thee now more dangerous to his throne. To whom thus the Prince of Darkness answered, glad.
Fair daughter, and thou son and grandchild both, high proof ye now have given to the race, to be the race of Satan. For I glory in the name antagonist of heaven's almighty king, amply have merited of me, of all the infernal empire, so that so near heaven's door with triumphal act, have met mine with this glorious work, and made one realm hell in this world, one realm, one continent of easy thoroughfare. Therefore, while I descend through darkness, on your road with ease to my associate powers, them to acquaint with these successes, and with them rejoice, you too this way, among those numerous orbs all yours, right down to paradise descend, there dwell in reign and bliss, thence on the earth dominion exercise, and in the air chiefly on man, sole lord of all declared, him first to make sure your thrall, and lastly kill. My substitutes I send thee, and create plenipotent on earth, of matchless might, issuing from me. On your joint vigour now my hold of this new kingdom all depends, through sin to death exposed by my exploit. If your joint power prevail, the affairs of hell no detriment need fear. Go and be strong. And so saying he dismissed them, and they with speed their course through thickest constellations held, spreading their bane. The blasted stars looked wan, and planets strook, real eclipse then suffered. The other way Satan went down the causeway to Hell gate. On either side disparted chaos overbuilt exclaimed, and with rebounding surge the bars assailed that scorned his indignation. Through the gate, wide open and unguarded, Satan passed, and all about found desolate, for those appointed to sit there had left their charge and flown to the upper world. The rest were all far to the inland retired, about the walls of Pandemonium, city and proud seat of Lucifer, so by allusion called of that bright star to Satan, Paragon. There kept their watch the legions, while the grand in council sate, solicitous what chance might intercept their emperor sent. So he departing gave command, and they observed, as when the Tartar from his Russian foe by a Stratian cover over the snowy plains retires, or patrician Sophie, from the horns of Turkish crescent, leaves all waste behind the realm of Aldul, in his retreat to Taurus or Caspian. So these, the late heaven-banished host, left desert utmost hell, many a dark league, reduced in careful watch round the metropolis, and now expecting each hour their great adventurer from the search of the foreign worlds. He, though the midst unbarked, in show plebeian angel militant of lowest order, passed, and from the door of that Plutonian hall, invisible, ascended his high throne, which under state of richest texture spread, at the upper end was placed in regal lustre. Down a while he sat, and round about him saw unseen, as last from a cloud his fulgent head and shape star-bright appeared, or brighter clad with what permissive glory, since his fall was left him, or false glitter, all amazed at that so sudden blazed the Stygian throng, bent their aspect, and whom they wished beheld, their mighty chief returned. Loud was the acclaim,
Forth rushed in haste the great consulting peers, raised from their dark divan, and with like joy congratulant approached him, who with hands silence, and with these words attention won.
Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers, for in possession such not wanly of right, I call ye and declare ye now, returned successful beyond hope to lead ye forth triumphant out of this infernal pit, abominable, accursed, the house of woe, and dungeon of our tyrant, now possesses lords a spacious world, to our native heaven little inferior, by my adventure hard with peril great achieved. Long were to tell what I've done, what suffered, with what pain voyaged the unreal, vast, unbounded deep of terrible confusion, over which by sin and death a broad way now is paved, to expedite your glorious march. But I toiled out my uncouth passage, forced to ride the unattractable abyss, plunged in the womb of unoriginal night and chaos wild, that jealous of their secrets fiercely opposed my journey strange, with clamorous uproar protesting fate supreme. Thence how I found the newly created world, which fame in heaven long had foretold, a fabric wonderful of absolute perfection, therein man placed in paradise, by our exile made happy. Him by fraud I've seduced from his creator, and the more to increase your wonder with an apple. He thereat offended, worth your laughter, hath given up both his beloved man and all his world to sin and death a prey, and so to us, without our hazard, labour, or alarm, to range in and to dwell, and over man to rule, as over all he should have ruled. True is, me also he hath judged, or rather not me, but the brute serpent in whose shape man I deceived. That which to me belongs its enmity, for he will put between me and mankind. I'm to bruise his heel, his seed, when it's not set, shall bruise my head. A world who would not purchase with a bruise or much more grievous pain. Ye have the account of my performance. What remains, ye gods, but up and enter now into full bliss? So having said, a while he stood, expecting that their universal shout and high applause to fill his ear, when contrary he heard on all sides from innumerable tongues a universal dismal hiss, the sound of public scorn. Sorry, I lost my place. Of public scorn. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself now more. His visage drawn, he felt to sharp and spare, his armies clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted down he fell, a monstrous serpent on his belly prone. Reluctant, but in vain, a greater power now ruled him, punished in the shape he sinned, according to his doom. He would have spoke, but hiss for hiss returned with forked tongue, for now were all transformed alike to serpent, all his accessories to his bold riot. Dreadful was the din of hissing now through the hall, thick swarming now with complicated monsters, head and tail, scorpion and asp, and amphisbaena dire, Cerestus horns, hydrus and ellipse drear, and dipsus, not so thick swarmed once the soil bedropped with blood of Gorgon, or the isle of Fusia. But still greatest he the midst, now dragon grown, larger when whom the sun engendered in the Pythian vale on slime, huge Python, and his power no less he seemed above the rest still to retain. They all him followed, issuing forth to the open field, where all yet left of that revolted rout heaven fallen, in station stood, or just array, sublime with expectation, when to see in triumph, issuing forth their glorious chief. They saw but other sight instead, a crowd of ugly serpents. Horror on them fell, and hoarded sympathy, for what they saw they felt themselves now changing. Down their arms, down fell both spear and shield, down as they fast, and the dire hissed renewed, and the dire form catched by contagion, alike in punishment as in their crime. Thus was the applause they meant, turned to exploding hiss, triumph to shame cast on themselves from their own mouths. There stood a grove hard by, sprung up with their change, his will who reigns above, to aggravate their penance, laden with fair fruit, like that which grew in paradise, the bait of Eve used by the tempter. On that prospect strange the earnest eyes they fixed, imagining for one forbidden tree a multitude now risen, to work them further woe or shame, and yet parched with scalding thirst and hunger fierce.
though to delude them scent could not abstain. But on they rolled in heaps, and up the trees climbing sat thicker than the snaky locks that curled Megara. Greedily they plucked the fruitage fair to sight, like that which grew near that bituminous lake where Sodom flamed. This was more delusive, not the touch but the taste deceived. They fondly thinking to allay their appetite with gust, but instead of fruit, chewed bitter ashes, which the offended taste, splattering noise rejected. Oft they essayed hunger and thirst, constraining, drugged as oft. With hatefulest relish they writhed their jaws, with foot and cinders filled. So oft they fell into the same illusion, not as men who they once triumphed, when he had lapsed. Thus were they plagued and worn with famine, long and ceaseless hiss, till their lost shape permitted they resumed, or yearly enjoyed, some say, to undergo this annual humbling certain number of days, to dash their pride and joy from man seduced. However, some tradition they dispersed among the heathen of their purchase was go, and fabled how the serpent whom they called Ophion, with Uranum, the wide encroaching Eve, perhaps had first the rule of high Olympus, thence by Saturn driven and Ops, ere yet dictation love was born. Meanwhile in paradise the hellish pair too soon arrived. Sin there in power before, once actual, now in body, and to dwell habitual habitant. Behind her death close following pace for pace, not mounted yet. Not mounted yet on his pale horse, to whom sin thus began. Second of Satan sprung, all-conquering death, what thinkest now of our empire now? Though earned with travel difficult, not better far than still at hell's dark threshold to have sat watch, unnamed, undreaded, than thyself half-starved. Whom thus the sin-born monster answered soon, to me, who with eternal famine pine, alike as hell, or paradise or heaven. Their best with most I raven may meet, which here, though plenteous, all too little seems to stuff this maw, this vast unhide-bound core. To whom the incestuous mother thus replied, Thou therefore on these herbs and fruits and flowers feed first, on each beast next, and fish and fowl, no homely morsels, and whatever thing the scythe of time mows down, devour unspared, till I in man residing through the race, his thoughts, his looks, words, actions all infect, and season him thy last and sweetest prey. This said, they both betook them several ways, both to destroy or unimmortal make, all kinds, and for destruction to mature, sooner or later, which the Almighty, seeing, from his transcendent seat the saints among, to those bright orders uttered thus his voice.
See with what heat these dogs of hell advance to waste and havoc yonder world, which I so fair and good created, and had still kept in that state, had not the folly of man let in these wasteful furies, whom impute to folly me. So doth the Prince of Hell and his adherents, that with so much ease I suffer them to enter and possess a place so heavenly, and conniving seem to graffiti my scornful enemies that laugh as if transported with some fit of passion. I to them had quitted all, at random yielded up to their misrule, and knew not that I called and drew them thither my hell-hounds, to lick up the draught and filth which means polluting sin, with taint hath shed on what was pure, till crammed and gorged, nigh burst with sucked and glutted offal, at one fling of thy victorious arm, well-pleasing Son, both sin and death and yawning grave at last, through chaos hurled, obstruct the mouth of hell forever, and seal up his ravenous jaws. Then heaven and earth renewed shall be made pure to sanctity that shall receive no stain. Till then the curse pronounced on both proceeds. He ended, and with a heavenly host audience loud sang hallelujah, and as the sound of seas, though through multitude that sung, Just are the ways, righteous are thy decrees and all thy works, who can extenuate thee? Next to the Son, destined destroyer of mankind, by whom new heaven and earth shall the ranges rise, or down from heaven descend. Such was their song, while the Creator, calling forth by name his mightiest angels,
gave them several charges, sorted best with present thing. The sun had his first precept so to move, so shine, as he might affect the earth with cold and heat scarce tolerable, and from the north to call decrepit winter, from the south to bring solstitial summer's heat. To the blank moon her office they prescribed, to the other 5 their planetary motions, aspect and sextile, square and trine, and opposite, of noxious efficacy, and when to join in synod, unbenign, and taught the fixed their influence malignant, when to shower, which of them rising with the sun or failing, should prove tempestuous. To the winds they set their corners, when with bluster they to confound sea, air, and shore, the thunder when to roll with terror through the dark aerial hall. Some say he bid his angels turn askance the poles of earth, twice 10 degrees and more from the sun axle. They with labour push the oblique, the centric globe. Some say the sun was bid turn rinds, and from the equisential road, like distant breath to Taurus, with the sea and Atlantic sisters, and the Spartan twins up to the tropic crab, thence down amain by Leo and the Virgin and the Scales, as deep as Capricorn, to bring in change of seasons to each clime. Else had the spring perpetual smiled on earth with vernant flowers, equal in days and night, except to those beyond the polar circles. To them day had unbenighted shone, while the low sun, to recompense his distance in their sight, had rounded still the horizon, had not known east nor west, which forbid the snow from coldest Stoyland, and south as far beneath Magellan. All that tasted fruit the sun, as from Thystean banquet, turned his course intended. Else how would the world inhabited, though sinless, more than now avoided pinching cold and scorching heat? These changes in the heavens, though slow, produced like change on sea and land, sidereal blast, vapour and mist, and exhalation hot, corrupt and pestilent. Now from the north of Norumbega and the Samoyed shore, bursting their brazen dungeon, armed with ice and snow and hail and stormy gust and flaw, Boreas and Cassius and Argistus loud, and Thracius rend the woods and seas upturn, with adverse blast upturns them from the south, and notice an Afer black, with thunderous clouds from Sierra Leona. Thwart of these this fierce force rushed the Levant and Pronant winds, Eris and Zephyr with their lateral noise, Sirocco and Lebeccio. Thus began outrage from liveless things, but discord first daughter of sin among the irrational, death introduced through fierce antipathy. Beast now with beast gain war, and fowl with fowl, and fish with fish, to graze the herb all leaving. Devoured each other. Not much stood in awe of man, but fled him, or with countenance grim glared on him passing. These are from without growing mysteries, which Adam saw already in part, though he hid in the gloomiest shade. To sorrow abandoned, but worse felt within, and in a troubled sea of passion tossed, thus to disturbed sought with sad complaint. Where was I? Sad complaint. Oh, miserable if happy, is this the end of this new glorious world, and me so late the glory of that glory? Who now become accursed of blessed, hide me from the face of God, whom to behold was then my height of happiness? Yet well, if here would end the misery I deserved it, and would bear my own deservings, but this will not serve. All that I eat or drink or shall beget is a propagated curse. O voice once more heard, delightfully increase and multiply. Now death to hear, for what can I increase or multiply but curses on my head? Who of all ages to succeed, but feeling the evil on him brought me, will curse my head, ill-fair ancestor impure. For this we may thank Adam, but his thanks shall be the extrication. So besides mine own that bide upon me, all from thee shall the fierce reflux on me redound, on me as their natural centre light heavy, though in their place. O fleeting joys of paradise dear, bought with lasting woes! Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mould me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me, or here place in this delicious garden? As my will concurred not to my being, it was but right and equal to reduce me to my dust, desirous to resign and render back as I received, unable to inform the bots too hard. Thy terms too hard, rather, by which I was to hold the good I sought not. To the loss of that sufficient penalty, why hast thou added the sense of endless woes? Inexplicable thy justice seems, yet to truth, say too late, I thus contest, then should have been refused those terms whatsoever, when they were proposed. Thou didst accept them. Wilt thou enjoy the good, and then cavil the conditions? And though God made thee without thy leave, what if thy son proved disobedient? And reproved, retort, wherefore didst thou beget me? I sought it not. Wouldst thou admit for his contempt of thee the proud excuse? Yet him not thy election, but natural necessity begot. God made thee of choice his own, and of his own to serve him. Thy reward was of grace, thy punishment then justly as at his will. Be it so, for I submit, his doom is fair. The dust I am, and shall the dust return. A welcome hour whenever. Why delays his hand to execute what his decree fixed on this day? Why do I ever live? Why am I mocked with death, and lengthened out to deathless pain? How gladly would I meet mortality my sentence, and be earth insensible. How glad would lay me down as in my mother's lap. There I should sleep and rest secure. His dreadful voice no more would thunder in my ears. No fear of worse to me and my offspring would torment me with cruel expectation. Yet one can doubt pursues me still. Least all, I cannot die, lest that pure breath of life, the spirit of man which God inspired, cannot together perish with this corporeal clod. Then in the grave, or in some other dismal place, who knows, but shall I die a living death? Oh, thought horrid, if true! Yet why? It was but breath of life that sinned. What dies but had life and sin? The body properly both had neither. All of me then shall die. Let us appease the doubt, since humane reach no farther knows. For though the Lord be of all infinite, is his wrath also? Be it man is not so, but is his wrath also? Be it man is not so, but mortal doomed. How can he exercise wrath without end on man whose death must end? Spirit of man, which God inspired, cannot together perish with his corporeal. Wait, the page didn't change. Can he make deathless death? That were to make strange contradiction, to which God himself is impossible held, as argument of weakness, not of power. Will he draw out for anger's sake, finite to infinite, in punished man try to satisfy his rigor? Satisfied never, that were to extend his sentence beyond dust and nature's law, by which all causes, according still to the reception of their matter, act not to the extent of their own sphere, but say that death be not one stroke, I suppose, but retrieving sense, but endless misery from this day forward, which I feel began both in me and without me, and so last to perpetuity. Ay me, that fear comes thundering back with dreadful revolution on my defenceless head. Both death and I am found eternal, incorporate both, nor I am not on my part single. In me all posterity stands cursed. Fair patrimony that I must leave these sons. Oh, were I able to waste it all myself, and leave ye none. So disinherited, how would ye bless me now your curse? Why should all of mankind for once... now mankind what? Oh yeah, Why should all mankind for one man's fault thus guiltless be condemned if guiltless? But from me what can proceed, but all corrupt, both mind and will depraved, not to do onely, but to will the same with me? How can they stand acquainted in sight of God? Him after all disputes forced I absolve. All evasions vain and reasoning, though through mazes, lead me still but to my own conviction. First and last on me only, as the course and spring of all corruption, all the blame lights due. So might the wrath for fond wish, couldst thou support that burden heavier than the earth to bear, than all the world much heavier, though divided with that bad woman. Thus what thou desirest, and what thou fearest, alike destroys all hope of refuge, and concludes thee miserable, beyond all past example and future, to Satan only, like both crime and doom. And oh conscious, into what abyss of fears and horrors thou hast driven me, out of which I find no way from deep to deeper plunged. Thus Adam to himself lamented loud through the still night, now as ere man fell, wholesome and cool and mild, but with black air accompanied, with damps and dreadful gloom, to which his evil conscience represented all things with double terror. On the ground outstretched he laid, on the cold ground, and oft cursed his creation. Death is often accused of tardy execution, since denounced the day of his offence. Why comes not death, said he, with one thrice acceptable stroke to end me? Shall truth fail to keep her word, justice divine not hasten to be just? But death comes not at all, justice divine mends not her slowest pace for prayers or cries. O woods, O fountains, hillocks, dales and bowers, with other echo far I taught your shades to answer, and resound far other song. Whom thus afflicted, when sad Eve beheld, desolate where she sat, approaching nigh, soft words to his fierce passion she essayed, but her with stern regard he thus repelled. Out of my sight, thou serpent, thou name best befits thee with him leagued. Thyself is false and hateful, nothing wants but that thy shape, like his, in colour serpentine, may show thy inward fraud, to warn all creatures from thee henceforth, lest that too heavenly form, pretended to hellish falsehood, snare them. But for thee I had persisted happy, had not thy pride and wandering vanity, when less was safe, rejected my forewarning, and disdained not to be trusted, longing to be seen, though by the devil himself, him overweening to overreach. But with the serpent meeting, fooled and beguiled by him thou, I by thee, to trust thee from my side, imagined wise, constant, mature, proof against all assaults, and understood not all but was but a show, rather than solid virtue, all but a rib crooked by nature, bent, as now appears, more to the parts sinister, from me drawn, as well as thrown out as supernumerary, to my just number found. Oh, why did God, Creator wise, that people highest heaven, with spirits masculine, create at last this novelty on earth, this fair defective nature, and not fill the world at once with men as angels, without feminine, or find some other way to generate mankind? This mischief had not then befallen, and more that shall befall innumerable disturbances on earth through female snares, and straight conjunction with his sex. For other he shall never find outfit mate, but such as some misfortune brings him, or mistake, or whom he wishes most shall seldom gain through her perverseness, but shall see her gained by a far worse, or if she love, withheld by parents, or his happiest choice, too late shall meet, already linked in wedlock bound to a fell adversary, his hate or shame, which infinite calamity shall cause to humane life, and household peace confound. He added not more, and from returned, but Eve not so repulsed, with tears that ceased not flowing, and tresses all disordered, at his feet fell humble, and embracing them besought his peace, and thus proceeded in her plaint. Forsake me not thus, Adam, witness heaven what love sincere, and reverence in my heart I bear thee, unweeting have offended, unhappily deceived, thy suppliant I beg and clasp thine knees, bereave me not, whereon I live, thy gentle looks, thy aid, thy counsel in this uttermost distress, my only strength and stay. Forlorn of thee, whither shall I betake me, where I subsist, Whilst yet we live, scarce one short hour perhaps, between us two let there be peace, both joining as joined in injuries, one enmity against a foe by doom express assigned us, that cruel serpent. On me exercise not thy hatred, for this misery befallen, on me already lost, me than thyself more miserable. Both have sinned, but thou against God onely, I against God and thee, and to the place of judgment will return, there with my cries inopportune. Heaven, that all the sentence from thy head removed may light on me, sole cause to thee, all of this woe, me, only just the subject of desire. She ended weeping in her lowly plight, immovable till peace obtained from fault, acknowledged and deplored. In Adam wrought commiseration, soon his heart relented towards her, his life so late in sole delight. Now at his feet submissive in distress, creature so fair his reconcilement seeking, his counsel whom she displeased, his aid, as one disarmed, his anger all he lost, and thus with peaceful words upraised her soon. Unwary and too desirous, as before, so now of what thou know'st not, who desirest the punishment on all thyself, alas, bear thine own first. Ill able to sustain as full wrath what thou feelest as thou less part, and yet my displeasure bears so ill. If prayers could alter high decrees, I too that would speed before thee, and be louder heard, that on all my head might be visited thy frailty and infirmer sex forgiven, to me committed and by me exposed. But rise, let us no more contend, nor blame each other, blamed enough elsewhere, but strive in offices of love, how we may lighten each other's burden in our share of woe. Since this day's death denounced, if aught I see will prove not sudden but its slow-paced evil, a long day's dying to augment our pain, and to our seed, O hapless seed, derived. To whom Eve, recovering hard, replied, Adam, by sad experiment I know how little weight my words with thee can find, found so erroneous, hence by the just event found so unfortunate, nevertheless restored by thee, vile as I am, to place of new acceptance, hopeful to regain thy love, the sole contentment of my heart, living or dying from thee I will not hide, what thoughts in my unique, unquiet breast arisen, tending to some relief of our extreme end, though sharp and sad, though yet tolerable, as in our evils and of easier choice. If care of our descent perplex us most, which must be born to certain woe, devoured by death at last, and miserable it is to be others' cause of misery, our own begotten, and of our loins to bring into this cursed world a woeful race, that after a wretched life must be at last food for so foul a monster. In thy power it lies, yet ere conception to prevent the race unblessed, to bring unbegot. Childless thou art, childless remain, so death shall be deceived as glut, and with us two be forced to satisfy his ravenous maw. But if thou judge it hard and difficult, conversing, looking, loving, to abstain from love's due rites, nuptial embraces sweet, and with desire to languish without hope, before the present object languishing with like desire, which would be misery and torment less than none of what we dread, then both ourselves and seed at once to free, from what we fear for both, let us make short, let us seek death, or he not found, supply with our own hands his office on ourselves. Why stand we longer shivering under fears, that show no end but death, but have the power of many ways to die, the shortest choosing, destruction with destruction to destroy. She ended here, and vehement despair broke off the rest. So much of death had her thoughts entertained, as did her cheeks with pale. But Adam with such counsel nothing swayed, to better hopes his more attentive mind labouring had raised, and thus to Eve replied, Eve, thy contempt of life and pleasure seems to argue in thee something more sublime and excellent, what thy mind contemns. But self-destruction therefore sought refutes that excellent thought in thee, and implies not thy contempt, but anguish and regret for loss of life and pleasure overloved. Or if thou covet death as utmost end of misery, so thinking to evade the penalty pronounced, doubt not but God hath wiselier armed his vengeful ire than so to be forestalled. Much more I fear, lest death, so snatched, will not exempt us from the pain we are doomed to pay. Rather such acts of contumacy will provoke the highest to make death in us live, then let us seek some safer resolution, which methinks I have in view, calling to mind with heed part of our sentence, that thy seed shall bruise the serpent's head. Piteous amends, unless be meant whom I conjecture, our grand foe Satan, whom in certain serpent hath contrived against us this deceit. To crush his head would be revenge indeed, which will be lost by death brought on ourselves, or childless days resolved as thou proposest. So our foe shall scape his punishment ordained, and we instead shall double ours upon our heads. No more be mentioned them of violence against ourselves and wilful barrenness that cuts us off from hope, and savours wanly rancour and pride, impatience and despite, reluctance against God and his just yoke laid down our necks. Remember with what mild and gracious temper we both heard and judged, without wrath or reviling. We expected immediate dissolution, which we thought was meant by death that day, when lo to thee pains wanly and childbearing were foretold, and bringing forth soon recompensed with joy fruit of thy womb. On me the cursed slope glanced on the ground, with labour I must earn my bread. What harm? Idleness had been worse. My labour shall sustain me, and at least colder heat should injure us. His timely care hath unbesought provided, and his hands clothe us unworthy, pitying while he judged. How much more, if we pray him, will be his ear open, and his heart to pity incline, and teach us further by what means to shun the inclement seasons, rain, ice, hail, and snow, which now the sky with various fates begins to show us on this mountain, while the winds blow moist and keen, shattering the graceful locks of those fair spreading trees, which bids us seek some better shroud, some better warmth to cherish our limbs benumbed, ere this diurnal star leave cold the night. How we his gathered beams reflected, may with matter sere foment, or by collision of two bodies grind the air trite to fire, as late the clouds justling, or pushed with winds rude in their shock tine the slant lightning, whom thwart flame driven down, kindles the gummy bark of fir or pine, and sends a comfortable heat from far, which might supply the sun. Such fire to use, and what else may be remedy or cure to evils which our own misdeeds have wrought. He will instruct us praying, and of grace beseeching him, so as we need not fear to pass commodiously this life, sustained with him our many comforts, till we end in dust our final rest and native home. What better can we do than to the place repairing where he judged us, prostrate fall before him reverent, and there confess humbly our faults, and pardon beg with tears watering the ground, and with our sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in signs of sorrow unfeigned, and humiliation meek. Undoubtedly he will relent and turn from his displeasure, in whose looks serene when angry most he seemed, and most severe, but what else but favour, grace, and mercy shown? So spake our father penitent, nor Eve felt less remorse. They forthwith to the place repairing where he judged them prostrate fell before him reverent, and both confessed humbly their fault, and pardon begged, with tears watering the ground, and with their sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned, and humiliation meek. Alright, that's the end of the 9th chapter. Next week we'll start in on chapter 10, and after chapter 10 we only have 2 chapters left, so we may actually just push it and finish next week. We'll see. Anyway, I've overrun my time already. I'll make it short to point out what I do around here. Friday nights, I record paper cuts live. You've just experienced that. It's a public domain book. We just keep reading until we've gotten to a stopping point. Wednesday nights on Twitch, I do a variety stream. Usually it's games. Right now I'm finishing up Oracle of Ages. Pretty soon we'll be working on some pet projects, a set of Dungeons and Dragons dice mostly. And Monday nights on YouTube is Monday afternoons on YouTube is my original content, first impression series I call Frozen Thunderfinds. Anyway, that's it from me, you all. I gotta get to sleep. This has been Paper Cuts, and I hope it didn't sting.